One definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly, expecting different results. Addiction is a kind of insanity. The American people have been addicted by relentless indoctrination to the worship of a cynically concocted fantasy version of their country. The first step in breaking addiction is to get out of denial. Our video, Let Your Life Be a Friction to Stop the Machine, was made to jolt Americans awake to their reality. Politicians and pundits say Americans are not stupid. This is evidently untrue. We have a long record of complicity in our ruin, and absent some reasonable explanation, that defines stupidity. Addiction is the explanation. Indoctrination by propaganda works. It is how a people is made to enslave itself and to willingly become pawns and livestock for its ruling class. ClassWarFilms is doing a series of videos to show the various ways the corporate tyranny has betrayed the 99%, and in so doing sowed the seeds of its own destruction. First, then, our American political farce. The founders had deep, experience-based fears about government. Liberals like Jefferson feared tyranny. Conservatives like Hamilton feared anarchy. The Philadelphia Constitutional Convention, in bruising debate, created a republic in which elected representatives were to act in the name and the interest of the people. The best minds feared its susceptibility to corruption, but in the end relied on the separation of powers into executive, legislative, and judicial branches to offset that threat. Their reliance was naive. Their fears were not. Consider, legislation often determines which endeavors succeed and which fail. People elect officials to act justly and equitably, but nothing guarantees that they will. Men empowered to bestow economic favors attract those who seek them. In early America, economic activity was modest, risky, and limited. With small-scale production, great returns were rare. As commercial options exploded, so did realization of enormous profits. By the end of World War I, America was the greatest economic power on earth, and giant corporations controlled the great bulk of the nation's business. The effect of economic expansion on our political system has been integrated into the American myth so as to inculcate a quasi-religious belief in the ultimate goodness and rationality of America. As officially represented, there is a sense of inevitability about it. Americans are taught that the Founders' plan has worked perfectly and that the sacred Constitution, followed faithfully, has assured that fairness intended. That is simply untrue. American courts, from earliest days, exhibited a continuous, strong, rarely modified bias in favor of massive corporate industry and against the interests of the American people. This is justified, when mentioned at all, as having been necessary to our phenomenal success. What it actually proves is that private capital has always worked to betray that well-being of the people which was the core demand of our revolutionary experiment. The explanation for this is so clear on diligent inquiry that only the total capture of the public mind can account for acceptance of the web of lies that conceals it. It is appalling that a fact so undeniable can be to many a revelation. Money buys the allegiance and the service of men in power, in courts as anywhere, and has done so throughout our history. The ways in which money has completely corrupted our system are as various as the many government offices and those who occupy them. They range from cash bribes to campaign and lobbying contributions, to luxurious junkets, to assurance of lucrative positions in companies or on boards, and include all sorts of favors, perks, and privileges. The growth of commerce from early shops, wharves, and plantations into the massive juggernaut of the corporate tyranny that owns the global capitalist game today has depended on corruption of our officials and policy every step of the way. And it has had a rate of return on that criminal racket far beyond that of its most lucrative businesses. Today, the power and control of the financial sector dwarfs that of all other sectors of the economy, and its mighty leverage is relentlessly brought to bear to render any actual reform impossible. With no effective means to prevent the rampant buying of influence, there is no limit to what money accomplishes now in the political arena. Americans have been represented, with rare exceptions, by venal, mediocre men in Congress and shallow, unprincipled non-entities as president. Jefferson, Lincoln, and the Roosevelts were inspiring leaders, but that distinction was won only by endlessly taking on the sleazy, sold-out majorities in their Congresses and parties. The power of the corporate tyranny has become so incontestable that no president can now be nominated and elected without having been thoroughly vetted and anointed with its approval. Massive money no longer influences elections. It owns them. And because the corporate tyranny cares only for controlling national policy, it makes no critical difference to it which of its sociopaths becomes chief executive. For generations, Americans have been bamboozled into believing that the parties offer real choices in presidential candidates whose policies will be significantly different. This fatuous fairy tale is promoted as if true, in a vestigial hangover from a past when their rivalry was actually based to some extent on competing principles. Principles have nothing to do with these contests beyond one absolute requirement. The president must be a committed servant and champion of the corporate tyranny. Both parties now represent the corporate tyranny openly and exclusively, and Congress and the presidents are effectively its employees. The public is continually subjected to an absurd and farcical Punch and Judy show of raucous, rancorous, burlesque conflict on hot-button social issues that arouse violent passions in the ignorant and uninformed, and have nothing whatever to do with their economic, social, and political well-being. The recent asinine vulgarity of the Republican presidential primary is a testimony to the absolute primacy of money in the process. Never in the long, shabby history of this event has such a contemptible collection of dingbats, defectives, and aberrations been assembled. This troupe of startlingly repulsive demagogues and charlatans would have had no chance of being allowed a moment's consideration a generation ago. And opposing them, the other choice is a bald-faced fraud and flim-flam man whose chief claim to positive accomplishment as president has been to have perpetrated the most ugly and cynical betrayal of the American electorate in history. He has done more in one term to single-handedly destroy belief in our political system than any previous combination of the hustlers and phonies who were his immediate predecessors. If the future seems dark and foreboding, that is because your view of it is clear. Contrary to the ringmasters of the exceptionalist myth, America's fate does not hang on the outcome of this or any other presidential election. America's fate, under the system of predatory capitalism that rules our betrayed republic, has long been determined. Nothing can now alter our inevitable decline toward meltdown and catastrophe. When Benjamin Franklin was asked what kind of government the convention had created, he replied, "A republic, if you can keep it. We have not kept it, and it is lost." For exactly that reason, it is critical that Americans face reality and drop their denial. The world does not end because a political system is found to be dead to those it should serve. This is not a unique occurrence. It is not even unusual. It is routine in history. To create a humane future, our dead system must be resisted, rejected, buried, and replaced. This will take tremendous resolve and a galvanizing of purpose seldom achieved by a people, but it is the way, the only way, toward a future in which the role of government is the defense and nurture of all life and of man as a part of it. As Che said, "Let us be realists. Let us do the impossible."